and thank you for joining us for yet another episode of Walking Digital Corridors. What episode
Ooh.
are we on of season 2 now?
We're
Four,
on, I
five?
want to say episode 7, 6 or
Oh,
7. Yeah,
time flies when you're having fun, right?
exactly.
Oh, good stuff. Good stuff. So I think today we've got a really pertinent topic, given the impact of the macroeconomic storm or economic uncertainty and how that is affecting businesses' risk aversion. So we're seeing stakeholder groups or decision making units, should I say, grow in size in an attempt to mitigate the risk involved in any investment. So I'm joining today from the Groucho Club in London. I'm about to shoot off into a high spot enablement workshop following which I'm sure there'll be a ton of good content to share. But
Looks
again,
like you're in the snooker room.
I know. I've got the VIP treatment today. There's a little billiards. I say a little billiards table. It's quite a big billiards table in the background. But yeah, we felt that it was fitting to reverse roles a little bit today, just given the wealth of experience that you've had, Alex, in dealing or managing sales cycles that involve a variety of sizes of decision-making units, buying groups. So
Yeah.
did you want to give yourself a little intro and just add a bit more light on or add a bit more color on your background there?
Yeah, I'd love to. And I think what's really come to light for me over the last couple of weeks, I was delivering a training program to 20 people of differing experiences, and they asked me the question, "Who are you? Who the hell are you?" And we were already like 4 weeks into the training, and so it gave me an opportunity to tell the group a bit more about me and to give them uh, some kind of depth into my experience and why I deserve to be training them. And the feedback that I received was quite amazing, really. I felt like I was showing off, but actually the feedback I got was that was really helpful to understand your experience. I really feel like you know what we're talking about. So I guess just by way of introduction, I think everybody knows me by now, but my real name is Alex Abbott. My alter ego is the bearded sales guy, I think maybe for obvious reasons. I've spent 31 years in sales. So, my first experience of selling, if it wasn't trying to convince my mum and dad to buy me an ice cream when I was a kid, my first real experience of selling was when I was 19, when I was knocking doors on what started off as beautiful summer's days, trying to sell Kirby vacuum cleaners to Mr. and Mrs. I quickly realized how difficult it was then knocking those same doors in the winter. Wasn't quite as much fun. So yeah, 31 years in sales, 24 years in B2B sales. I fell into B2B sales after trying to get into it for 7 years in the year 2000. Had no idea what I was doing. It took me 6 years before I found a way of selling a system, created my own system to sell to the point where I was doing 200 to 300% of my target year over year, and found a way to ensure that I was successful every single year. I then spent, must have been 3 to 4 years of consistent overperformance before being headhunted into an organization to then spend 2 more years as a sales rep, overperforming, relocated my family, as you know, Jordan, to Australia in 2012 because I was one of the top performers, and the business I was working for had acquired another business and they needed some help selling the premium software solution they were providing to the market at the time. Went through an acquisition. Oracle acquired us, relocated the family again, this time to Dubai, and built a business from 0 to $22 million ARR from scratch. 1 sales rep to 22 sales reps, team of 40 people by the end of that four-year period. Then came back to the UK and ended up leading a team of 43, 6 sales directors, 37 reps. And we transformed the way that we sold from a product-led approach to a value-based approach. So, 5 President Club wins across 3 different companies, and I've really loved my career. One thing has always remained true to me throughout that time, and that's the power of conversation, and the fact that if you're in control as a salesperson of the number of conversations you're having with your target audience, then the chances are you're going to develop the pipeline that you need to succeed, and ultimately the revenue that you need to hit your number year over year. And it's as simple as that.
Yeah. And I guess it adds that predictability. Once you've experienced it, once you've got that methodology, that foundation, that process, that's when you can start to look forward and start to gauge how by how much you're going to exceed quota.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good stuff. And I think I should start calling myself the not so bearded sales guy. I do try, but strangely, even Jensen's got more facial hair than I do. And he's younger than me, but hey ho.
I had the same problem. You've inherited that problem, I'm afraid. Even at the age of 40, I would struggle to grow a beard, and now at the grand old age of 50, it's finally maturing.
Oh, brilliant! Brilliant.
And that's just me.
Yeah. Well, I'll keep you posted over the next 20 years as to how it comes along. But yeah, so that's really handy. I mean, given that you have operated in a variety of regions, is there, or have you noticed an influence on typical sizes of decision-making units? I mean, the stats are showing that in recent years they have been growing. McKinsey state that it's typically between 9 and 10 stakeholders involved in any purchasing decision. Gartner between 6 and 10. Obviously, since COVID, we've actually seen collaboration between those stakeholders increase as well. Are there any regional nuances that you've seen, or has it just been over time, it's become more prominent?
Yeah, I'd say regional nuances, yes. I'd say the biggest nuance or the biggest difference is the size of the organization you're selling to and the complexity of the solution that you're providing. So, I have a great deal of respect for salespeople that sell solutions that span many different many different buying influences. So, I sold email marketing software and services, and I would argue that's one of the most complex solutions that anyone has to sell for the following reason. So you've got users of the software. These are people that are building email campaigns. You've got creative people that are designing and coding the creative that needs to work in the email. And the design is influenced by the data that is being drawn upon in the database, another stakeholder, another influencer, that is then influencing what content is shown. You've got database security people, you've got website security influencers. You have this incredibly complex environment. You've got technology people that are responsible for building APIs and configuring the system. Some email marketing teams were 12 people, that I was selling to. So, I think for me that's the biggest, nuance, if that's the right word, is the size of the organization and the complexity of the solution you're selling.
Yeah.
But then I did find that between Europe and Australia, back in 2012, the biggest difference for me was that I found an easier path to the economic buyer in Australia, because the teams were less mature in terms
Yeah.
of the complexity and the politics that existed within them.
Yeah.
And so, I was the one thing I would say that really helped me is I was acutely aware of the differentiating commercial value the solution I provided to that business.
Yeah.
And so as soon as I could get to the economic buyer, I was able to quantify the differentiating commercial value that I was able to deliver to that business. And I think
Yeah.
that's why I was able to do 3 enterprise deals within 7 months from a standing start, from landing in the country with no network.
Yeah. Incredible. I think you touched on a really valid point there. I think what it boils down to is the complexity doesn't necessarily come from the quantity of stakeholders involved, but the fact that often these stakeholders do belong to different departments. They're held to different metrics. They've got different agenda criteria. And what our job is to do is to ensure that they reach, that we are the right person to work with, that we can solve their challenges and deliver value. So I do have a question following up, but it looked like you were poised to add something there.
Well, I'm intrigued to know the question. As I listen to you talk, I'm just thinking of a story of not so much an idea, a story, a real life situation that happened many years ago that I think could be relevant.
Yeah, well, fire away with that, and I'll park the question.
Okay. Well, so it was, depends how far back I go. It was 2002, and I was receiving formal training on strategic business development from Miller Heiman. And I wasn't a successful salesperson at the time, but that training really rang true with me. It was logical. It made so much sense. Fast forward to 2005, the beginning of 2005, I'd had a pretty tough time in those previous years. I was in my 4th job, I think. Hadn't hit my target yet in any one of those years. And bearing in mind, I'd been in sales for 5 years at that point. But I managed to get this job with a company called eDialogue. And in those days, in email marketing and cross-channel marketing, the two businesses that I aspired to work with, that were considered kind of the Rolls-Royce and the Ferrari of email marketing, was eDialogue and Responses. And through a recommendation, a referral, I managed to get a job as a business development director at the beginning of 2005 with eDialogue. And I thought, yes, I've made it. So I thought, right, I'm going to put my Miller Heiman training into practice. So I created my target list. It was full of enterprise businesses, and I went about building relationships, creating conversations with all of the stakeholders that I felt were relevant, because I needed to understand from an email and cross-channel marketing perspective, what were their biggest challenges? What made them tick? What were they looking to achieve? And as I started to work on this small business at the time called Arcadia Group, which consisted of, I think, 7 brands, including BHS at the time. I realized through those conversations with all of the brands and head office that the decision didn't sit with head office, even though the economic buyer sat in head office. The influence sat across all of the brands, and head office would rubber stamp the decision if there was a consensus across all of the brands to make a switch. And, fast forward 12 months, I hadn't signed a single deal. I was close to winning a pilot with one of the brands. It was one of the retailers called Evans. It was sort of aimed at sort of middle-aged women, started as a catalog business, had lots of data, so could drive deep levels of personalization within email marketing. Anyway, went on Christmas break, came back to work on the 2nd of January. I got fired for poor performance, and Evans was just on the cusp of being signed, but that wasn't enough to save my job. I ended up joining a business called Experian Cheetah Mail. I continued my strategy that I'd been following with Arcadia, and I'd developed a lot of good relationships by then. Evans ended up signing a deal, or eDialog ended up signing a deal with Evans, one of the brands in the Arcadia group. I quickly signed a deal with Topshop, the flagship brand of the Arcadia group, and we were head to head, Cheetah Mail and eDialog, to win the rest of the group. And there were a few defining moments. We talk about defining moments. For me, one of the defining moments was, it was a series of defining moments. It was creating workshops with each brand and their email marketing users, whereby they played with the software. And I held their hand and I walked around the room and I asked what help they needed to use the software and create a campaign. And I really felt like I was winning their hearts and minds of the users. And I felt that by doing that, that would create influence within each of the brands that would get back to head office, that actually this is the business we want to work with because they care about us the most. And by the end of that first year at Cheetah Mail, we'd won all of the brands within the Arcadia group and Evans from eDialog. So I was able to say, up yours, eDialog.
I was just about to say that's a bit of a.
I was right all along. But one of the challenges I think that many salespeople have today is that they're not given the time to work strategically like that all of the time.
Yeah.
A lot of businesses do, but just look at how many redundancies are happening, and go-to-market strategies changing year over year and accounts switching. But anyway, that's probably a different topic.
Yeah, it's certainly one I think we should cover. So you touched on those definements. So how do you go about actually creating a defining moment within a sales engagement? As you said, when time is pressed, so to speak, and there's such dramatic shifts, is it a case of that's foundational, that's a through line for you? Talk me through your approach there.
I think you never quite know when that defining moment's going to happen, but you know when it's happened. And the way to increase your chances of it happening is, for me, is to make sure you are engaging with every possible stakeholder that you can to influence the way that they think about you as the individual. Do they like you? Do they like me? Do they trust me? And ultimately, do they believe that I'm going to deliver value to them?
Yeah.
And I've got a couple more examples. I think, John Lewis was another win whilst at Cheetah Mail, where there were 3 brands within the John Lewis group. Waitrose was one of them. And I did a very similar thing whereby I made a point of ensuring I was in front of all of the stakeholders that I believed were influencing a decision, and across those three brands. And what was interesting with this is it was an official RFP that was being run by headquarters, and so there were, there were these rules. You've got to follow this process. Don't speak to anybody. And I thought, well, screw that. I'm going to speak to as many people as possible. I've got nothing to lose. I hadn't been part of creating the RFP with John Lewis. And so I would do things like search for events and find out whether or not any of the stakeholders within the group were visiting those events. And then I would make sure I attend those events and accidentally bump into those people. And I remember there was this one event, and the lady's name was Claire Manning. if she's listening. She's probably not, but I made a point of going to this event, and in the networking between sessions, started chatting to her, and we just hit it off. And she was one of the key influencers, relatively junior, but she was one of the key influencers within the overall decision. And so I personally think that was one of those defining moments. I was able to build a relationship with somebody that was a key influencer within the decision making process.
Yeah. So you've spoken a few times there about how, typically we think, okay, we need to be speaking as senior as possible because they're the ones that hold the budget, they're the ones that are going to sign off. But as you've said, sometimes it's more junior people, sometimes it is the user level, and I think that's a trend that we are seeing, that those not necessarily decisions are being made, but the perhaps it is the decisions are coming further downstream. Now, obviously, that increases the number of potential people that could be influencing that decision. So, how many stakeholders should we be engaging with from any one target account?
Yeah, I don't think you can put a number on it, really. It really depends. With the Arcadia group, there was maybe 30, I want to say, 30 different people that I was engaged with throughout the 2-year period, if you count from day one to closing all of the brands. ASOS was about 12 people. John Lewis, maybe 10. The Body Shop was maybe 20 across Europe and the US. I mean, I think you have to be making these judgment calls through every step of the way. What is it that I'm trying to achieve? What's the opportunity? If I decide to behave in a different way and go after an additional element of the business within the group, what's that going to do to the sales cycle? And as an enterprise sales rep, you're constantly balancing that in your own mind with the pressure that you get from the business that you're working for. I remember my boss at the time saying, no, we need to close the revenue quickly. And I'm thinking, well, I've got quite enough pipeline to manage, these relationships and manage these deals. I know where I'm going. I want to hit 200% of my number this year, and I want to hit 200% of my number next year. I don't want to burn my bridges this year by closing everything. And I've got, and then I'd be accused of sandbagging. So, I think it's a constant balancing act. I think that if you have a strong belief system and you are acutely aware of the differentiating commercial value you deliver, then you're confident having a conversation with anyone in the business that you're selling to about the value that you bring to them, as well as the value that you bring to the business, so that you keep all of those conversations pointing towards the North Star, whatever that North Star might be, profitability, top line revenue growth, for example.
Yeah, indeed. So, just to sort of summarize what you said, it really does depend. I guess the more people that you can engage with that are going to influence that decision, then you should be engaging with them. Now, I'm conscious that for some people that may be listening, there may be a bit of a nervousness there that the more people that they're speaking to, the higher the risk that they're going to lose control of that sale.
Yeah.
What would you say? What recommendations or advice would you give to those people?
Yeah, look, at the risk of repeating what I've just said, I remember when we were acquired by Oracle, and I was suddenly immersed in a world where I was overlaid onto many other salespeople who didn't think the same way that I did. And their view was, no, we need to minimize the number of stakeholders. I need to sell to the individual. And this is quite a generalist statement, so I apologize. Certainly for the people that I engaged with, for the most part, it was, no, we need to minimize the number of stakeholders we're engaged with, mitigate the risk, sell to the power, and let them do the selling internally. And for the most part, because of the complexity of what we were selling, as I described earlier, and the number of stakeholders involved, if we weren't building consensus effectively, then we were losing control. We had no control over the timelines. And so it was one of the biggest challenges I had to educate my teams, my peers, let's say, not my teams, my peers, on how much we could increase average order value, how much we could shorten the sales cycle, and how much we could mitigate risk in the deal by actually increasing the number of stakeholders that we were engaged with in a more strategic manner.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really good point. I think as you are relying on your champion for better term, you've lost control essentially, because you don't know how well they're going to be able to build consensus and sell the solution internally, right? So
yeah, and if there's any listeners of that are fans of Challenger, Challenger was all about qualifying the mobilizer. Does the mobilizer, aka the champion, have enough equity within the organization to drive change, to mobilize change, to convince others? And so if all you did is focus on that one individual, you do have a very narrow, you do have a very narrow set of opportunities to work on. You do increase your close rate as a result of focusing on that. But I think there's a balance between that approach and identifying those opportunities that could still be very good opportunities if you're helping to find, if you're finding multiple champions and building consensus with them to drive a strategic approach that results in a big win. And I've managed to do that very successfully over the years.
Brilliant. I am conscious of time. We're almost double over. So I will sort of bring us to a close there. Have you got any final tips, pointers, insights that you can share? I think we've already covered a whole load of good stuff there. But any final remarks?
I think the final remarks are that there is no specific right and wrong, and everyone is different. I mean, you could say there's a right and wrong. I know what's worked for me, but everyone is different. I'd say lean into creating conversations with as many people as you can within an organization as you're strategically kind of developing relationships, so that you can establish where the most effective path to power is, and gain that intelligence along the way. I think so many businesses today are focused on just trying to get to the power, and you spin so many cycles and waste so much time doing that because they're targeted by everyone. Insights being thrown at them multiple times a day. The zone of resistance is high and it's thick. So you have to find creative ways of navigating the complex path to power. And that comes from speaking with as many people as possible within an organization, in my experience, not just focusing on the power.
Indeed. Brilliant. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Thank you very much for sharing the insight and being so open and transparent. I will have to shoot off because I am late for the enablement breakfast, but really looking forward to next week. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say before we close, if you see any, I've got friends at High Spot, so if you see any of my friends at High Spot, tell them I say hi and enjoy the enablement session this morning. And thank you for helping me draw out some of these stories. I've really enjoyed myself.
Indeed. Good stuff. Looking forward to next week's session, in which we'll be moving into, once you've actually sort of started that conversation, how do you move it from a sort of icebreaker intro conversation through to a commercial call? And we will have Jensen back fighting fit with us next week. So Jens, if you are listening, hope you feel better soon.
Yeah, cool. Thanks
Good
all.
stuff.
Have a great day.
Take care.